Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy Jonathan Macri with you for another edition of the Knicks Film School Podcast. We are doing the live thing again. We're making a habit out of this. Coming at you at 9 o'clock on Monday evening, off night, obviously for Knicks, who just keep beating everybody, unless you count, a couple of teams that we don't need to talk about. Hi, Jeremy Cohen. How are you? What's going on?
Hey, John. Everything's great. Yeah, the Knicks are undefeated against the Knicks are undefeated when they win games, is the best way to put it. Would you agree with that statement? Because it's a true statement.
I need to hold on. I need to do some more research on that.
Sure. I'll take your time.
Yeah, no, they are indeed undefeated when they win games. I was thinking about this though the other night, actually before the Miami game, because if you take out the 7 games that they lost against the teams that everybody cares about, they were a very symmetrical 39-13 against the rest of the league. So 3 wins for every loss, and now obviously after last night's win, even including those other games, 2 wins for every loss. A lot of symmetry here as we descend upon March. So that's cool, right? If you like numbers.
It is, and we do. And the other thing, we talk about 40 wins and 20 losses, the Phil Jackson rule, but time is just a social construct. So as far as I'm concerned, the Knicks got to 40 wins, and they also have 20 losses. But who are we to say when that 20th loss arrived? It's arbitrary at that point. As far as I'm concerned, the Knicks got their 40th win when it mattered, and that's just the way it goes, right?
With record keeping what it is these days, who could be too sure? Mm-hmm. So obviously we're here to do a solid hour, maybe an hour and a half on MarJon Beauchamp. Mm-hmm. Very excited to talk about him and the massive impact that he will make on this roster down the stretch. No, we'll hit on Beauchamp later. We'll hit on we'll give our in memoriam on Jacob Toppin and Matt Ryan, and maybe we'll even talk about the Mark Stein report from last night. But let's start, as we always do, talking about this team and where they're at. Interesting week. Not the most convincing of weeks, I guess, if you're a Knicks fan and you were looking to restore order coming off of last weekend's disaster. I mean, it was an interesting week because they went 3-0. They won all 3 games, and yet there were segments of all 3 games, significant segments of all 3 games, that had you pulling your hair out. And they came at different times in each of those games, but they were definitely present for all 3. And yet they won, and I guess the storyline, which probably coincides with a designation that Jalen Brunson got today, he was named Eastern Conference Player of the Week again. Is this team like both the most clutch team in the league and the most like paper tiger-ish team in the league because they can't beat anybody good? How do you reconcile those two things with each other? I have no idea.
I look at the scoreboard at the end of the day and the standings, and that's what makes me feel the best about it. But it's one thing. It'd be better if, the Knicks are a clutch team, especially because they're led by one of the most clutch players in the NBA, if not the most clutch player in Jalen Brunson. It would be a lot better as well if they just never had to get to those clutch moments because they were winning games, but you're not going to win all these games, and they've pulled out the W's where they've had to. So how do I reconcile with it? Again, it's look at the standings. This is, we can put caveats of like, oh, well, the Grizzlies, they've been 1-6 or so since the All-Star break. And
are they that bad? I didn't realize that.
They've had a rough stretch. And to that, I say, okay, well, how is it that, why should we give the Grizzlies an out, but then the caveat doesn't go the other way for the Knicks in terms of beating, well, what was the 2 seed is now, I believe, the 3 seed because the Lakers are looking really good. So, yes, should they have stayed further ahead against the Sixers than they did? Absolutely. Would it have been better if they hadn't made it as close to the Grizzlies? Even though the Grizzlies, I believe, when the game happened, weren't they like 30-6 or 20? Some out. They probably weren't 30-6 because there aren't 6 home games left or 5 home games left. But it was it only had 6 losses, I believe, at that point in the season, and a lot of wins at home. And then, of course, last night against Miami, where the Heat, not a better team by any stretch.
No.
Got hot at the right time, caught the Knicks napping. And I didn't feel like that game was completely gone. I was sitting next to a friend of mine who was a Nets fan, and he kept saying, and we were watching it on my phone as the Oscars were on, and he kept saying, "It's over, man. It's not happening." And I was like, "Nah, kind of close. It's fine." And even when it was a double-digit lead, felt all right about it. And then they came back. That's what the Knicks do. To me, they are firmly at worst the 5th best team in the NBA, and that's really
At
okay.
worst, the 5th best team in the NBA.
Let me put it this way. Let me rephrase. I think that
I mean, that's fine. That's
right,
I think
there's
a warm take.
What? Because you think worse than that? They've shown up against teams that are not OKC, Cleveland, and Boston.
I think given how the Lakers have, I don't even say how the Lakers have been playing recently, because every time I watch them, I feel like they're not playing well, and yet they just keep winning these games.
No, they're very good.
But like, yeah. Given what the Lakers have been doing recently, and obviously who's on their roster now, and then given Denver, and given what the Knicks, I mean, look, we're gonna mention it until they give us a reason not to mention it. Given what the Knicks did not do against the powerhouse teams, of the league in the last several times they played them, I think more people than not would probably say that they are a top 6 team, and as opposed to a top 5.
So you've Denver ahead of the Knicks in this scenario.
It's weird because the Knicks have a really good matchup against Denver, and I think that's borne itself out over the last 2 years. But on balance, do I think the Nuggets are a better team right now than the Knicks? I think it's at least a conversation.
Okay, that's fine. Listen, you're at the mercy of your own schedule, but the Knicks beat the Nuggets on January 29th, right?
Yeah.
And then after that, the Nuggets, they were 28-19 after that game, 39-22. So they went 11-3 over that stretch. And they faced the Sixers, the Hornets, the Pelicans, the Magic, the Suns, the Blazers, the Hornets. That was a 9-game winning streak. And you only play the teams on your schedule, but how many of those teams do you count being above 500?
I mean, the Blazers are like the 73 Knicks, the way they've been playing. But yeah, other than them.
No. Sure. And then they lost to the Lakers by 23. And then they beat the Pacers. That was a very solid win. Lost to the Bucks. That was not a great win. Beat the red hot Detroit Pistons, who had won 8 games in a row. And then looked out of sorts for at least the first, 2.5, 3 quarters against the Celtics, and then managed to make the ending at least respectable. So to me, I still see the Knicks as a cut above the Nuggets, but that doesn't really matter at the end of the day because they don't play in the same conference. I have the Lakers as a better team than the Nuggets. So, but they're great. This is the Knicks, very good team. And
we're arguing about, are they top 5 or top 6?
Right. Exactly. Well, yes, sure. Exactly. And I think that was the thing about this week. And, John, every now and then I'll get a little sarcastic on Twitter. It's just who I am. It's not to be it's not to be malicious or anything like that. It's just like Knicks had this great Knicks had this great win against Memphis. Back and forth, complete seesaw action, hung in there until the very end. And I was maybe a little bit more sarcastic than some caught on, because to me it was like incredible win. This is a great season. Things are going well. This is a team that's about to have back-to-back 50-win seasons, assuming they don't fall off a cliff over the next however many games that are left. And the joke was, well, doesn't really matter, right? Because all ESPN or maybe some other media organizations might just want to say, well, do you remember the Knicks are 0-7 against top 3 teams? And it goes back to the conversation we had before last week, which was very much of not saying, hey, be grateful about the Knicks and shut up about it, but also the bar has been raised every year and it's going to keep raising. And it's exciting that we still get to see a team that has its back against the wall, and the Knicks have Jalen Brunson and no one else does. The Dallas Mavericks used to have him. They don't have him anymore. The Knicks do. And I think that that one Grizzlies game, to me, that was the most enjoyable game of the season so far.
Really?
And maybe that's recency bias, but it was a sort of thing where at that time it was the second seed in the West. You're going toe to toe with them. They're shooting like crap, but also they're out rebounding you. And it was just the ability to find a way, no matter what, to find a way to win. And then Jalen Brunson hits that clutch shot. there's still too much time left on the clock. John Morant
Yeah.
draws the foul and then finds OG Anunoby, who had a phenomenal weekend as well. So it shows the character. It's like it's those moments that make the rest of the season feel even more worthwhile, because it's a team that digs deep, that cares, because how much of it felt like effort, how much of this season has felt like coasting, even though we know the Knicks are putting in the work. But the visual of it, at least to the fan in me, it didn't quite compute. So it was really nice to be able to see that manifest in not just a game, but in a win, a hard fought one. And again, I just keep going back to scoreboard, standings. That's what matters.
I think the Memphis win, you said it was your favorite of the year.
So far, yeah. And again, could be recency bias. I'd have to go back through, and I'll do that as you chat, see if there's anything that really comes closer.
I'm looking at it right now. It's like, it's funny because we had this conversation when me, you, and Andrew did our like our Hall of Fame, when we did the Hall of Fame for, what was it, Brunson, but it was just for last season, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Or was it, sorry, was it top 10 games for the Knicks of last season? Whatever it was, we were going through last season and we were like trying to sort through the games, and we were going back and forth between some of these games where it's like the Knicks blew out whatever team that was considered to be a great team. Well, how do you stack that up against a game that's like a nail biter, back and forth, struggling, and like which of those games do you enjoy more? You probably enjoy the blowout more in the moment, but like it doesn't reach the heights that the nail biter does. I think the point that I've, like, if I was gonna put a theme on this week for the Knicks, it's that, to me, and this is not going to sound complimentary, but I'm going to get back around to why I think this is actually a great sign. This week has made me feel a lot better about the losses that they had to the Cavs and the Celtics in particular. Those basically those two, and then if you want to go back even to the Celtics loss from earlier in February, although maybe that doesn't translate quite as much, but definitely these last two losses, because I just don't think the Knicks have been playing very well. And like, they came out and Mikal Bridges hit 1,000,000 shots in the first quarter against Philly, which was good. And that was good job. Jalen Brunson getting him involved, the whole thing, like all of that. But then after that, they kind of like meandered around, and granted they didn't have Cat in that game, so that's notable, but they didn't play their best ball after the first quarter. And again, the first quarter, a lot of it came down to Mikal Bridges shot making. The Memphis game, like we talked about, they gave up, or like you just mentioned, they gave up 1,000,000 offensive rebounds, and they weren't really able to capitalize on the Grizzlies shooting struggles for a large portion of that game until they made all the plays that mattered late. And then you go to the Miami game where they, let's be frank, played like dog shit for 24 minutes. And then the defense honestly didn't even really kick into gear until midway through the third quarter, when OG Anunoby, with the assistance of Mitchell Robinson and Deuce McBride, like decided like we're gonna become something different. So I look at the bigger picture as like, it's not that the Knicks can't beat these powerhouse teams. It's that they haven't been playing well, and they didn't play well against Cleveland. They didn't play well against Boston, and they got what happens to you when you don't play well against those teams, and those teams come into their own building and they're highly motivated to put on a show, which I think both of those teams were in those games. So I'm like, I don't necessarily feel like the Knicks have figured out any big picture answers, although I do think we need to talk more about the OG Anunoby game that we saw yesterday, and obviously the return of Mitchell Robinson, big story of the week. Like, but I'm encouraged that like this was a reminder this week that it's still a process, no pun intended. And even though the Knicks are going through it, the fact that they're winning close games, the fact that they are 40-20, despite the fact that they really are just have not played their best ball yet, I think that's encouraging for the long term, unless you're just going to sit here and say like, well, yeah, but they're never going to find it. So they're like, I think, I don't know. I still have hope that they're going to play better.
You win or you learn. And we have 7 examples of the Knicks with 0 wins and a whole lot of learning. If we're going to assume that they don't learn anything from that, then I don't think you know Knicks basketball. not you, of course, just the general you. And I look at this team, and they played their first 58 games without Isaiah Hartenstein because he left in free agency, and Mitchell Robinson because he was injured. And then the players they had behind them, which were Precious Chua, who has pretty much been a DNP since Mitch came back, I mean, for the most part. And then
4
Jericho
minutes,
Sims.
it was only because of foul trouble. That's it.
Right, exactly. And then Jericho Sims, who was traded to Milwaukee because the Knicks did not need to do it. They didn't need to have him because they also were getting back, or at least they were able to play Huck Porty a little bit more. Now, Huck Porty's, of course, out, but it just goes to show that over 70% of the Knicks season, just over 70%, was played without a legitimate rim protector, veteran rim protector who they trust consistently. And the lack of pressure that the Wings have had to play with, knowing that, hey, there's someone in the paint who can protect the rim really well, it does ease up a little bit more for everyone across the board. And I don't want to sit here and say it's a new day, right? Everything's going to be fine from now on. But there's a calming presence in that you got this quote unquote mid-season acquisition because he was able to be healthy. And you just got to keep maintaining it. But Knicks aren't going to get 48 minutes of rim protection like they are accustomed to in years past. But if you can get Mitchell Robinson going they're ramping him up, but what, 22, 24? If you can play around half your game with rim protection, the other half is Karl Anthony Towns. And again, curious because we didn't see it this weekend. Are the Knicks going to play Cat and Mitch together? And if they are, what does that look like positionally? That'll be a fascinating development as well, but a lot to be proud of.
It's certainly a lot to be proud of. And we're coming at this from an analytical point of view in terms of like trying to make an assessment about the team and where they're at and what they're maybe capable of doing this year. The season's been a lot of fun for me. I think it's been a lot of fun for you. Yeah. And I do think you just
yes and no. No, truly. Yes and no.
Yeah. No, yes and no.
I've had more enjoyable seasons. I've had a lot worse ones too.
Yeah. I think they're going to wind up winning more games than last year. And yet was last year a more enjoyable season? Probably. Which is interesting, but
comparisons are a thief of joy and expectations can suck.
You're always with the catchphrase. It's amazing.
It's the gist of it. It's truth.
It is true. I know. You're just amazing. You pull it out like that, like it's nothing, which is what makes it so good. But there is a lot to be proud of them. 10 straight clutch wins. Who does that? That's not a thing. That's not a thing that you see in the NBA. Like that doesn't happen. 10 consecutive.
Does if you're the New York Knicks, but I hear you. I agree.
I just pulled it up. Yeah, exactly. I just pulled up before. Over the last 3 games, Jalen Brunson has 29 clutch points, shooting 60% from the field, 50% from 3, and 8 to 10 from the line. The next closest player in terms of clutch points over the last 3 games is John Morant with 18, and then after that is Anthony Simons with 15. Like Jalen Brunson is literally lapping the field when it comes to clutch points. And yeah, when you have that guy on your team, like sometimes that's all that matters. Between what we saw from OG, giving us kind of all a reminder if we needed it, like, oh, this thing still exists. And then the Mitch part of it all, yeah, there's lots of reasons to be encouraged moving forward. I feel like it's a natural transition here to talk about the Kessler report, if that's okay with you.
Sure. The one thing I was going to say is on March 1st, Pitless Ball tweeted that shot tracking began in 1997. Okay. Since then, 782 players have taken at least 30 shots of this variety in season. Do you want to guess where Jalen Brunson ranks of the 782 players in effective field goal percentage?
In terms of shots of what variety? Of clutch variety?
Clutch variety, excuse me. Yes.
Since when?
1997. 782 players. Where does Brunson rank in effective field goal percentage in the clutch?
In the clutch. Top 50.
So again, this was before the Heat game, but out of 782 players, John, he ranks second.
No. That's a real thing.
That's what I'm looking at right now. I bookmarked it for this podcast.
Oh, you're so generous. Do you know who's number one?
I will look in the replies to see if it's there. And lo and behold, it's David Wesley
Of course, it's David Wesley
of the Charlotte Hornets in
I was about to
2001.
say, once a Hornet, always a Hornet.
It was
David
by,
Wesley.
but here's the thing. David Wesley was at 72.1%. And Brunson at 71.8%. So there is still time for Captain Clutch, also known as the Climax, apparently. I didn't come up with that one, but it's a good one.
I was about to say, if you came up with that, we were gonna have to have a longer conversation. That's incredible.
Yeah. So he was at 71.8, and that was before the Heat game. So there's time for him to have the greatest season. And ironically, third is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. All right.
Well,
that's 70%.
That checks out because SGA is. I mean, we don't have to talk about his
last
his
season, though. Not this season, but yes.
Yeah, but still, he's really good. So the Kessler report. For anybody who missed it, shout out Mark Stein, who does a great newsletter. Reported that before the deadline, the Knicks were they were trying to get the Jazz to engage in trade conversations about Walker Kessler, like for this season, not preliminary talks for the offseason, although we've heard a lot of NBA reporters say over the years, like a lot of the conversations that get had during one transaction cycle, or maybe in anticipation of the next transaction cycle, so on and so forth. But apparently the Knicks were making a push. I don't think we need to get into like what the package would have looked like, because then we could go down a whole rabbit hole, and I don't know that we want to do that right now. But just the fact that they were kicking the tires here and given what we can be pretty sure the cost for Kessler was going to be, which again is probably why he's not a Knick today, probably why he wasn't a Knick this summer. I think I don't know if I'm being overly simplistic here. It's an indication to me that they know moving forward that like they are going to have to play a quote unquote traditional center alongside Karl-Anthony Towns for some not insignificant portion of games, seasons, series, so on and so forth. Did you read it the same way?
Yes and no. So here's why.
Okay. I love this.
Sure. Yes, the Knicks clearly needed rim protection. It was during a time where Mitchell Robinson had not yet returned to the court. Salary-wise, there would have had to be more pieces if it involved Mitch. If it didn't involve Mitch, the Knicks would have had to have gotten to at least $3 million to send out. And asset-wise, Mark Stein said that the Jazz just didn't have interest at all. They'd reevaluate in the offseason, but in-season trade, if Kessler just wasn't something that appealed to them. And in terms of the asset play the Knicks have or had at the time, it's really some swaps later. Not many, though. It's really 2026 or 2030. Okay. And they can't trade any first except for the Wizards first, which is really 2 high seconds, or at least projects to be 2 high seconds, one in 2026, one in 2027. So then you look at talent in-house, the Knicks would be moving out, but the Knicks have done a great job over time with midseason acquisitions of trading to try to get better, as opposed to doing an even swap using future assets to get win now pieces in the door. So all of that is yes, because I don't know if it would have been with or without Mitchell Robinson still being on the team. But the reason I say no is because the Knicks have the Knicks have a knack of saying, what's an asset or what player can we get that we can then flip for something of value later? How is this player, like Cam Reddish is another example. Cam Reddish was not doing much in Atlanta at that time. No. And the Knicks said, how can we get this player? In their minds, it was, we want to turn the Hornets first round pick, which will be 2 second round picks in the end, and Kevin Knox into something that can give us more value. And then what did they try to do within the next 3 weeks? Well, Cam Reddish was part of conversations about being traded, partially, I believe, as part of the Lakers 3-team deal that they discussed with Toronto as well.
Yes.
Point being, the Knicks could have seen an asset in real time, said, is that asset value depressed? The answer is, in this case, no, because Kessler's having a very good season. But can you get that player, bring them in-house, try to improve their value even further on a winning team,
Sure.
and then figure it out in the offseason to maybe help get you a piece that can add value in other ways? That's the only thing I can think of for why it would be no. But for mid-season, of course, if you're making mid-season acquisitions, because you intend for that player to help you win starting the day that you get him. So yeah, having 48 minutes of rim protection would have been an option if you moved Cat specifically to the 4, but then that wouldn't have been maximizing him to his best potentials offensively, which is why I'm so not miffed, but just fascinated by the report, because you're either putting Cat somewhat out of position or you're moving Mitch, or it just, something there didn't align. So one of those things that was just kind of either never know, or we'll figure it out in a matter of 4 or 5 months and make as deductive reasoning as we can.
Well, in terms of the money, correct me if I'm wrong, which please do. Kessler plus KJ Martin, that's not a figment, right? That he's really on the Jazz books.
I believe he is, yes.
Although I wonder, is there an aggregation? Is there
very possible there would have been, especially because
because he was just okay. So maybe I'm speaking out of my ass, but like that would have gotten them to just over 11 million, which Mitch makes 14, and the Jazz don't have any kind of salary constraints. I don't know if there's an aggregation issue with KJ Martin, but like they could have done that 2 for 1, and then it's about, well, okay, obviously, what are you adding to Mitch, because Jazz aren't going to do that deal, and obviously the Jazz did not contemplate any deal. We don't know what that deal it would have been. We don't know. Maybe Deuce was involved. Who the hell knows? I doubt it.
I doubt it as well.
I doubt it. Yeah. I'm just saying it just to say we have no idea, because there's been no reporting on it. So, I guess the reason I said what I said is because I think maybe the most reasonable explanation is that we shouldn't be miffed, and that the front office, this is essentially something of an admission by the front office, not an admission of defeat, but it is, if anything. And again, we'll find out more. We'll see how they operate this summer. We'll see what they end up doing. We'll see what the rumors are that they do, all that great stuff that we all enjoy. But like, we have kind of been under the assumption that the Knicks traded for Karl Anthony Towns with the, I don't want to say hope, because it's something stronger than hope, with the belief that it could work at the 5 with him. And I wonder if this is not maybe an indication of, well, maybe they just were like, hey, this is the best deal for us to make. We're going to try it at the 5. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to give it the old college try. And then we'll get, by the end of the season, we'll get a bunch of evidence. And then we'll pivot if we need to pivot later. And then this is just kind of an indication that, like, you know, we're like, the pivot is probably is coming in some way, shape, or form. Not in the form of we're going to get Rudy Gobert, who has to play 35 minutes every night, but in something along the lines of, like, we're going to get someone that's maybe a little bit more reliable than what we have, but then that gets us back to Mitchell Robinson and the whole thing. But interesting. I thought it was an interesting report. And that leads us to, I guess, the other news of the week. So, Jeremy, I have a quiz for you right now. Put you on the spot.
Okay.
I always like to make Jeremy look silly. It's
not very hard.
Can you name MarJon Beauchamp? I don't even know if I'm saying his name right. Career high in points. I wonder if I should give you an over/under, if that would be more fair, or if I should just try to make you guess the point total.
Is it in the 20s?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is in the 20s.
Okay. I'm gonna say 27.
The reason I hesitated, because is 20 points in the 20s?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 20.
Okay.
And then again, just because I'm sure you have this knowledge at the tip of your fingers, what team did he score 20 points against?
Against? My goodness. Can you give me a date? I'm not going to remember it. I'm just trying to think through. There's a method to the madness.
It was actually early in his rookie season. Imagine how excited Bucks fans must have been He did this on November 14th, 2022, like literally 3 weeks or 4 weeks into Milwaukee's season.
The reason that I asked was because
Yeah,
I
why
figured
did
if
you
it,
ask about the
I'm
date?
getting there. If you had said, yeah, it was in April, I'd be like, okay, so it's probably against a team that's tanking. And then I would have thought of tanking teams and then picked one of them.
This
But
team,
this is not tanking season. This is clearly
no,
beginning of the year. We're all getting settled season.
yeah, no,
Um,
this was a game against a team that at the time, were they any good? The team that he did it against ended up finishing exactly 500 in this year, although they had to go through several coaches to get to that 500 record.
They go through several coaches to get to that record.
If you got this, pull it. I'm gonna need an answer.
Gosh, I'm honestly just trying to think of teams that fired their head coaches in what 2021, 20 or 2022, 23.
22, 23. I would be so impressed if you got this because I did not remember that this team fired their coach. They had an interim coach in between the coach that they fired and the coach they ended up hiring.
I just completely okay. I'll muster a guess. The Orlando Magic.
Not a bad guess.
Okay.
The Atlanta Hawks.
Oh,
20 points against the Atlanta
Nate
Hawks.
McMillan.
There you go.
And
into
then,
Joe Prunty, into everybody's favorite interim coach, into Quinn Snyder.
Mhm.
Okay. That concludes the MarJon Beauchamp portion of the program. I don't think we need to make anything of this. It's a two-way contract. He's obviously a high pedigree, kid, first round pick. Were there times where he was maybe showed some flash? I mean, he was part of the Milwaukee rotation at times. Didn't work out, but hey, a lot of players have come through there over the last few years, young players that haven't seemed to work out. And then at least one of them thought that DiVincenzo has gone elsewhere and looked pretty good. Maybe that's what the Knicks are hoping on. They're hoping for the DiVincenzo effect.
So I can, let's elaborate a little bit because
sure.
Kev is on the ones and twos, but even with Andrew not present, I can hear him screaming right now because he's saying that's not what he like when he raised it in the group chat. He wanted to talk about the contract portion of it. And how
I was getting to that. So let's talk about the contract.
Right. I thought you were moving on to another topic. I thought we were going game ball. So
no. I wanted to talk about the reason Beauchamp got one of the two-way spots is they were unoccupied after they cut Matt Ryan and Jacob Toppin. Thank you both for your service. Which means they now have one two-way contract spot remaining. Of course, all of the two-way stuff has no bearing whatsoever on their salary cap, so that we should note that. Mm-hmm. And they still have the 15th roster spot open. So I don't know if you want to just take that and run with it.
No, it's a great point. Bobby Marks tweeted today about how Beauchamp is eligible for 12 of the remaining 22 games that the Knicks have. Now, I think if he's playing in any of those 12 games, the Knicks have bigger problems.
Or they've
right. And then it's the last however many just don't even matter. But he's not playoff eligible. You can't appear on a playoff roster if you are on a two-way contract. Jacob Toppin dressed for the maximum amount. Matt Ryan, they just, I believe, didn't need him anymore. Although he probably would have hit that criteria as well. The deadline for signing players as well had passed, and you had to be waived by March 1st in order to join a team. And so this to me is kind of at least I'm wondering, is this an audition for the 15th spot? Because the way that it works now, the Knicks could just churn out 10-day contracts for a bunch of players really until the end of the season if they absolutely wanted to. And financially, they'd be covered. There was enough wiggle room starting late last week, in February, on Friday, for them to do it, and they haven't. And it's not like, what I'm trying to figure out is why they haven't, because they can keep this spot open.
Why they haven't signed someone at least to a 10-day?
Correct.
Okay.
Because the Knicks have 14 players on guaranteed roster spots. And if we're talking about, when we talk about the minimum salary, the blanket assumption is that it's a player who has had at least 2 years of veteran experience, because the cap hit for this rookie, or for this minimum salary starts at anyone who's had 2+ years gets the same cap hit. They can give different salaries, but the cap hit is the same. If you're a rookie or if it's your first year, then it's a different hit than the second or above. So the Knicks have 14 players on the roster, all guaranteed, waiving Delon Wright or someone else doesn't earn them more money. So the question then is, why is it that they're letting time elapse when they'd be fine to keep locking into these deals? One possible thought is that they could waive a player on a minimum contract, create 13 roster spot, or have 13 players, and then they'd have enough money to split that at a certain date between two other guys. But it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, because then you've essentially traded for nothing when it comes to Jericho Sims going out, other than Besson and Wright. So they're stalling, or I don't know if stalling's the most accurate word here, but their lack of putting pen to paper with someone is it's puzzling, but not in a way that really tilts the scale one way or another. It's more just, I'm curious as to why they haven't done that at the very least with a 10-day, but they just haven't. And now we're seeing them fill out the 2-way. There's another spot that's open. Curious if Johnny Davis would receive that. I've seen also
they just got traded for his G League rights, correct?
Yes, he's now in the G League. I've seen Moses Brown's name floated about as a 2-way player. He's ineligible. He's played more seasons than you can have with the 2-way. It's really 4 seasons below. So who will get that last spot? Could be Johnny Davis, and then they have a 15th roster spot to do as they please. They could be using this as a way of paying someone a little more than a G League contract. For example, Beauchamp is making more on the 2-way than he would be. It's prorated, but making more on the prorated 2-way than he would on a 1-way deal. So makes sense why he's there.
The one name you haven't said yet is TJ Warren, who I think is the guy that probably been the leader in the clubhouse for a little while now to get the 15th roster spot. The fact that he's just kind of still out there. Would you be surprised if he is the one who eventually gets that spot?
Wouldn't be surprised at all. But the Knicks have really gravitated towards younger players, and TJ Warren, I believe, is 31. That's not a strike against him per se, but I mean, they just haven't gravitated towards the older players where they can. They've tried to focus more on the youth. I mean, Beauchamp has, at least there's length there. Again, I still don't expect him to see important minutes at all. But yeah, and he has to be young in order to be on the 2-way, which is the point for why he might be a better selection on the 2-way. And then later, it's also, are these players that you want to keep around next year? Is there a way that you add them and then churn their bird rights so that if you sign and trade them in the offseason away as part of salary that you need to hit a certain minimum, that you've got it made for yourself and you work it out that way? It doesn't hurt to have those types of kind of churn through different players to create more spending for yourself. So it's me, when it comes to guys like your 15th man 2-way players, it's really more of a formality. It's greasing palms with agents. I don't expect anything from them in relation to the Knicks and winning basketball. And if they surprise me, then that's awesome. But the norm is typically that they're just not going to accomplish more other than helping you facilitate trades or being break in case of emergency on the court.
Yeah, look, none of the players that we're talking about that we are in line to get any of these potential spots, like, are, all things go according to plan, none of them would ever play, as you kind of alluded to before. I mean, they have a guy right now on the roster, we mentioned him briefly before, Precious Achiuwa, who had stretches of last season, had stretches of this season where he was playing like 40 minutes a game, and he's not even in the rotation anymore. It kind of, which I think speaks volumes. Also, like, say this, man, he could be a frustrating player, and he's hot and cold, up and down. I think Thibodeau continues to look for every reason to give Landry Shamet minutes as the 9th guy in the rotation. And I know he's a little small, but Tibbs, for as much as he has a reputation as like a defense first, dinosaur, I don't know that he has any business having that reputation anymore, but it is what it is. Like, the dude he values shooting. Like, if you could shoot, if you could put the ball in the basket, he will try to get you on the court. And again, Shamit's shooting always more theoretical than actual, but he's been hitting some shots late. So give him credit for that. And yeah, we'll see how long that goes for. Okay. Anything else that we haven't covered before we move on to game ball?
Contractually, I think we're pretty good. I agree with Shamit. Seeing him dive on the floor for that loose ball was really nice to see because especially with the shoulder, he needed a little bit of time to come back to heal, and to be determined if he'll be a key rotation player in the playoffs. But the Knicks need depth and good regular season depth. So if they can get it from him as their ninth man, then I think they're in an okay place.
Strongly agree. Okay. On that note, we are going to give out some game balls, which, as Andrew likes to remind me, maybe somebody watching the show has never seen it before. So we should tell people what it is. It's given to a player, coach, or entity that stood out this week and deserves special recognition. I go first, which I think this is like the 18th consecutive week or something that I get to give out the game ball first. Again, for those unfamiliar, it's because I won predictions again last week, which I keep doing. I literally don't remember when's the last time I've lost. Spoiler alert.
Your memory is crap anyway, to be fair.
Spoiler alert, I'm going with Jalen Brunson, the guy who was just named the Eastern Conference Player of the Week. He's very good at basketball. And if they, we've had the conversation off and on, or at least I've had the conversation with myself on a lot of post games about who's the most important Knick and the most vital Knick and who's the Knick that the team can afford to lose the least. It has swung all the way back over to Jalen Brunson for any doubt that there may have been about that at various points of the season. There is no doubt right now. He is the most important person. He's the most important person that, like, they're the only other person who has been more important than him to this franchise in the last 50 years. I mean, Patrick Ewing. You want to tell me Pat Riley? Maybe. Anybody else?
How many clutch buckets did Pat Riley hit in his prime for the Knicks?
Not as many as Jalen has had.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, so it's a short list. He's just in the most rarefied air, and we love him here, and we probably don't praise him enough on the show and on this, like, in general as Knicks fans. My God, how lucky are we that we get to root for this dude? It's like pinch yourself every game you get a chance to watch him. It's a gift, and talk about not taking things for granted. Thankfully, we all got to experience this together.
It doesn't even. I can't even say that Jalen Brunson woke up because he was never really asleep. It just felt like he was resting a bit in comparison to the magic that he's had as of late. Because there was a moment where earlier in the season, it felt like, he's putting up great numbers and he's somewhat in rhythm with where it's at, but it's something kind of missing to him. Is he missing that edge? Not in terms of competitiveness. I mean, it's the same player, but just like something to me felt like a touch off. And I mean, there's no question that he's back.
Because last season was magical. It was literal. It was like you were watching literal magic, and this season didn't have that. And now you look and you're like, oh, wait a minute, what he's doing in clutch, is that better than last year somehow? And it's like this is insane.
Doesn't get old. Yeah, no, he's the obvious pick. If I'm not going to pick him because I can't, I'd love to give it to OG Anunoby, but I'm going to give it to Deuce McBride.
Hey,
there was something about, it seems crazy, but that dunk in Memphis stirred something in me. Like, I had a visceral and positive reaction to it where, I mean, caught them napping. It just exploded. And just, I don't want to say that was a needle mover for the game momentum wise, but it felt like an exclamation point in a game with a lot of ellipses. And it was nice to see that kind of fire. And, he closed against he was there, not Mikal Bridges in Miami. And based on, if we're talking about merit, especially recently, he deserved that. And I was glad to see Tibbs put him in when it wasn't working for Bridges. So, especially when you look at a lot of the success that Mitch has had in the incredibly small sample size of possessions, he's been paired with Deuce for, I think, all but 13 non-garbage time possessions. Not that there were really any garbage time possessions to be played in those two games. And a huge reason for them being positive is Deuce McBride. And then the only 13 that he's not on the court with Mitch, negative. So incredibly small sample sizes that people should not hold too close to their hearts, but something to keep in mind because it's just Deuce doing Deuce things.
And he is really good at doing those things, and the lineup data backs it up. Look at any lineup that Deuce is in with the other starters. Doesn't matter if he's playing for Mikal Bridges, although those numbers are like literally insane. He could be playing for OG, he could be playing for Hart, he's playing for Brunson. The numbers are all incredible. And this is where we usually lead to detention, which is given to a player, coach, or entity that needs to sit down and think about what they did for a while. We do not traditionally give out detentions in games in weeks where the Knicks go undefeated. I'm not going to give out a detention. We'll give out a second game ball. So keep up this graphic. I will say that we kind of skirted past the Bridges benching because it was a benching. There's no other way around it. It was benching. And the reason I wanted to do that is I think I'd like to I'm not drawing any conclusions yet. This happened before earlier in the season. It happens against the Charlotte Hornets the last day or the game after Thanksgiving. And then all that happened after that was Mikal Bridges went on to have the best month of his career and didn't get off the court. So I know there's a lot of conversation about, is this a sign of things to come? Is there a starting lineup change coming? All that stuff. I purposefully do not want to even dip our toe in that water yet. But it was interesting. That's all. Especially, and I will point out, and I'm curious if you have an opinion on this, the difference between this and what happened earlier this season, or what happened earlier this season when he was benched at the end of that Charlotte game. First of all, he was having a horrendous game, but he had been kind of not good for weeks. I think he's been okay. I think he's been pretty good for a while. He's at least been decent. And so for this to happen amidst that, especially so soon off that Philly game where he came out on fire, it raised an eyebrow. Did it raise an eyebrow of yours?
Had to have, of course. And
okay.
I mean, you said the word decent. Like, to me, if you are trading 5 first-round picks unprotected, you need better than decent. You just do. The expectations for him, rightly or wrongly, but in my opinion, fairly, they should be higher. There should be a standard. You didn't want to get into it, and I'm curious, just because do you not want to think about that as a result of the?
No.
I was just going to say, is it the concern of I don't really want to talk about it because if we had to get to that point, then it means that things have not gone well. Or is it just we don't know, so we're not projecting?
Because Mikal Bridges could come out tomorrow night against the Golden State Warriors and play 44 minutes and have a great game, and this is not a conversation. So I'm always leery about, even though it makes for great content, and if I was being a responsible host of the show, for like ratings purposes or whatever, the whole thing would be about Mikal Bridges benching. I just don't feel it's like I don't say it's like the ethical conversation right now. It's like it's ahead. We're putting the cart ahead of the horse. Like, he was having a bad game. Deuce McBride was having a great game. And he had been playing well, and Tibbs went with the thing that was working, which should not be a revolutionary thing. Coaches do that all the time. Around here, it is a big deal because it takes. How much does it take for Tibbs to go away from one of, quote unquote, his guys and go towards? And I guess maybe the thing, to your point, does it open the window of are we sure that Mikal is really one of Tibbs' guys? Which, again, that's a larger conversation. I don't even know if we have enough to know the answer to right now, but maybe that's a more interesting conversation.
Yeah, we know he is, right? Because
you think he is?
Yes, primarily because we know that he plays every single game.
Hold on, can I stop
And
you
we
for a
know
sec?
that he can play a lot of every single game. Yes.
You know who also played a hell of a lot of minutes of a hell of a lot of games?
You can talk about like
The
Brewer.
Crows staring right at me.
Sure. Different
Was it?
time. Yeah.
He
absolutely.
played RJ Barrett a shit ton of minutes. I think more because he had to, because
Yes.
RJ Barrett was the thing that filled the role at that time, and he needed this role. Was Tom Thibodeau ever in love with RJ Barrett? Look, I'm not going to sit here and say
Well,
I know definitively yes or no, but
this
my own
front
opinion
office
is no. But
This front office didn't draft RJ Barrett, but
no,
they
they
did
did
trade
not.
for Mikal Bridges, and I can't imagine that they would have made this move if Tibbs was vehemently against it.
I'm not
Sure.
I'm not suggesting anything of the sort.
Absolutely.
I am openly wondering whether the Mikal Bridges experience for Tibbs this year has left him wanting.
Well, of course, because this is not the Mikal Bridges that we have seen this season is not the best version of that we imagined. Correct.
Okay, so but with a guy like Josh Hart, let's just say, who has some very clear negatives to his game. We don't need to talk about them. We know what they are. He is as Tibbs a guy as there is in the league. And he could be having a bad game or a bad stretch of games. And Tibbs you damn well know Tibbs is going to trust him in the last 5 minutes of a close game because he's going to believe that in this instance, he's going to come through with a winning play. Bridges does not seem to exist in that same space right now.
Of course, but I think that's because Josh Hart keeps playing Josh Hart's game. Like when I look at Mikal Bridges, I don't see Mikal being the most optimized. And, but, a chunk of this is going to be coaching and a chunk of this is going to be on Bridges himself, where especially when you look at the 3-point attempts per 100, for example, or the 3-point rate, like that, there's clearly lacking in comparison to where he has excelled before. And the returns are short of what the Knicks have needed from that area as well. Yeah. So I think Tibbs, he's talked about this in the past where it's like he believes in Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges is going to be fine. And that's been the case, but need better than fine. Need to take a higher roll up. And the one thing I will say is I know that he went to the same alma mater as Jalen Brunson and as Josh Hart. All I have felt throughout a lot of this process is the Knicks didn't make this trade for a family reunion. They made this trade because they felt it would be the best form of basketball that they could, best player, especially with the fact that they traded Bogdanovich, who will not have played a single game this year, and expiring salary, and no rotation players, and no young players, just draft picks. So thinking through all of that, it's still need more. Need more from him.
No, not a single word though I disagree with. My second game ball will go to Mitchell Robinson. 1, for making his way back. 2, for having a big impact on the Memphis game. And 3, for diving on the floor against Miami. And I think playing a huge part in that turnaround, to say nothing of his offensive rebound, put back. He had another play in that stretch, which was massive. Another offensive rebound, which led to an OG3, which as they were making their run. So yeah, my second game ball will go to Mitch.
You're very used to winning the week, so I'd imagine that you'd be accustomed to by now that usually I get to go third, and then you go
This is a
fourth.
second game ball.
That shouldn't be how this works.
I don't should have.
We also didn't even talk about having a second game ball.
Listen, you've been shitting all over yourselves with these predictions lately, so.
That's true. Well, I'm just doing my best impersonation of you for the first few seasons that we did this, so clearly it's working.
What's your second game ball?
It was OG Anunoby. I mentioned that if I had a second one, I would, so I'll give it to him. What was the I saw in terms of with the newsletter that you had, the stat line and where it compared to?
Oh yeah, no,
his gonna be better on that than mine.
Points. It was like points, like with the 5 traditional categories: points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals. Like the only 2 Knicks who have ever hit all those marks in a game were Patrick Ewing and Bob McAdoo. So.
Pretty good.
And yet, the stat line wasn't nearly the most impressive thing about his game. It was just watching him absolutely take over on the defensive end.
Yes, it was. So
he's a worthy recipient. Predictions. And then if we have time, maybe we'll take a question or two. Oh no, this is not given to anybody. This is given to me because I keep winning. Knicks schedule this week: Tuesday, Golden State Warriors. Then we're on the West Coast. Thursday at the LA Lakers. Friday at the LA Clippers. It is just hitting me now that they are off on Saturday and Sunday, which is nice. We don't usually get weekends off. I mean, how many times have I gone to this well? I'll go to it one more time. I'll go 2-1.
I will go 1-2.
You're glutton.
Well, I mean, 3-0 against this very good Warriors team now.
Butler's back tonight, but hold on. Does it impact your pick that the Warriors are playing tonight? So they'll be on the second night of back-to-back.
They're still coming to Madison Square Garden, John. I mean, we talk about Steph Curry's heroic performance how many years later in a loss, mind you, but we still talk about that. So I'm sure Steph will just be Steph like he usually is. And I mean, the margin of error here, do I believe the Knicks will lose 2 games to what some of the best teams since the trade deadline? Although the Clippers maybe not as much, but yeah, I just think they'll lose. Do I think they'll lose 1 game? Yeah, I do. So I'll go with 2. And hey, I picked 1 and 2 last time, did I not? What happened?
You did.
Okay, so you're welcome. You're welcome, folks.
I was about to say, don't say you're welcome to me. Say you're welcome to all the Knicks fans out there who like to see their basketball team win.
I just sacrifice myself for your happiness.
If I had time today, I was going to go back and actually listen to all of the pertinent parts of all of our pods to see how much I am up, because I know no one's keeping track of this. At some point before the season ends, we're going to get a actual record of my dominance this year. Okay.
What is it you always say?
What, win graciously? I don't say that.
No, you definitely don't say that one. It's
I've never said that.
It's like, I may not. What is it? I may not be I may be a short man, but I'm also a small man. Something along those lines.
I don't know that I've ever said.
You've said something along those lines before. I know you have, because it was good.
I am short and I am small.
Well, take your W's. It's all right.
Jesus Christ.
Maybe you can stack them, and then we'll be the same height.
You know who's not small? Zach Edey, who
he's 7'4". Also, I'm not that much taller than you are anyway. So
this is true. We're both short. Yeah. You're not small though. Okay. Kev, you want to we'll do a question or two? All right, here we go. Anytime Knicks, who should get the final roster spot? Is there any names we haven't heard that may be on the Knicks radar? I'll just say that what's the first rule of Knicks fandom? Always pay attention to what Ian Begley says. I thought it was interesting that Ian took the time to draft a lengthy tweet on social media this week, extolling the virtues of one PJ Tucker, basically suggesting that, hey, if the Knicks could do worse than to give PJ Tucker a look for their 15th roster spot, veteran presence, obviously been through many playoff wars. I don't know that PJ Tucker has anything left in the tank as an NBA player. If he did, I know this, the PJ Tucker that once upon a time existed, he would be a wonderful fit on this basketball team. Unfortunately, I think that player disappeared 3-4 years ago. That's the only name that I would throw out that we haven't already talked about.
Yeah, I'll go with Ian's list. Other than that, unless there's a young player that can graduate for that 15th spot, just not quite sure who else it would be. I can tell you who it won't be is Myers Leonard announced his retirement last night, so it won't be Myers Leonard.
I bet you're disappointed at that.
Very, very much so. Yeah. It was right during the in memoriam that he announced it. So of the
talk
Oscars.
About small men who are actually large.
It's true. Second chances, people learn. You win or you learn, right? That was a massive loss, and he learned. And you know what? Actually, kudos to him. He did the work. I've read afterwards. He did a lot of the work. So I respect that. I respect that people can learn from their mistakes and change. And Myers Leonard did that, but he won't be a Knick because he's retired. So won't get that 15th roster spot.
It's a shame. Okay, you want to do one more and then we'll get out of here? Kev, Brian Martinez. What's going on, Brian? How are they going to improve the team next year without trading away any starters? I will just say briefly before I turn it over to the one who people want to hear answer this question. I started doing a little work on a newsletter that I'm going to save for a rainy day before the end of the season on just like off-season stuff. And I kind of landed on like it's basically going to have to involve trading Mitchell Robinson. Not 100%. Nothing's ever 100%. But if you are just looking at where they are salary cap wise, where they are as far as the second apron, where they are as far as being able to bring in players who make a little bit of money. And again, maybe it's not. Maybe it's Walker Kessler. You could get Walker Kessler for a song. In terms of player salary, it's all about what else you are doing. But hey, guess what? If you're bringing in Walker Kessler summer, you know who you're probably sending out in some deal somewhere? Mitchell Robinson. So my answer would be that it probably means saying goodbye to Mitch.
Yeah, I mean, you know me. I've how many seasons have I put together a cap or no cap involving Mitchell Robinson and call him Fernando because he's still here. But you see what I did there? Fernando Torres. Yeah. Still here.
You are one of one.
Thank
truly. I'm sorry your boy Timmy didn't win, by the way.
I am too. I really am.
I am really sorry. Cost me what, $200?
I don't care about that. No, I was really pulling for him, man, and it had to go to another LaGuardia alum. So shout out to Adrian Brody, but yeah, I was hoping for my boy to win, and that's all right. He's got a bright future ahead of him. He's gonna win one of these days.
I was about to say, as they said on, I think it was Big Picture, like he'll don a bear suit eventually and get his Oscar.
The Leo's treatment. Yeah, and the other thing I'll say is for the Knicks do have the taxpayer mid-level exception available to them this year. Most likely, I mean, as we've mentioned before, you can't have Mitch and Precious and the taxpayer mid-level exception. Although, given how Precious's role with the team is, I don't think that Precious would take precedence over the taxpayer mid-level exception because, yes.
I don't even know if they could have Mitch and the full taxpayer mid-level.
They can.
My math. They can? I'll go back and check my math.
That's fine. My favorite thing about the deadline is the moment it's done and I finished a live stream, I get to create the next year's spreadsheet. And I get to be a freak in the sheets with that. And I can tell you, I mean, if you didn't have Precious Achiuwa and you just wiped his cap hold away and you replaced him with taxpayer mid-level exception and then add some veteran salary or minimum guys, the Knicks are under the second apron. So they can do it if they just said goodbye to Precious and brought in some with the taxpayer.
Listen, I know there wasn't a whole lot of mid-level action. That sounds dirty this past summer, but like
to me, it doesn't.
I'm just gonna stop. It doesn't mean that they can't get a good player on that number. Okay, I think we're done. Jeremy, anything from you before we get out of here?
That's it for me. Hopefully the Knicks go 3-0 and Jon wins another week. Don't let me get hot.
Listen, these are fun. These games are fun. They're stressful. They're very stressful, but they are fun. And at the end of the night, you get to go to sleep with a big smile on your face, and you wake up with an even bigger, goofier smile on your face. And that's it's why we watch sports. So 22 games to go, unbelievably. Season kind of it goes slow, but it also kind of flies by. And we look forward to some more good basketball. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Kevin, on the ones and twos. And thank you, of course, everybody, for checking out another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Especially, I see we've got a bunch of people watching live right now. That's really cool. Be sure to check us out every week, where we're going to continue doing these shows live. And in addition, obviously, to post games and the pregame shows, we're basically moving everything that we do to the live format now. Just try to be on the up and up with where things are. And if you dig the show, give us a 5-star rating, write a nice review, all that fun stuff. Subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, the whole thing. And we will be back pregame before Warriors, postgame for me. I got a pod coming up on Wednesday with a very smart basketball person I'm looking forward to. But yeah, stay tuned to Knicks Film School for all that good stuff. And we'll be back. More fun and games before you know it. Peace out.